In New
West
Jersey,
Hall.
there lies an abandoned university dormitory, deserted since the 1970s after a mass disappearance that was never explained. Legends whisper that on nights when the moon wanes, faint laughter drifts through its corridors, mingling with the sound of footsteps wandering aimlessly in the dark.
This place gives me the creeps.
When a group
Come
of
on,
curious
we'll be
students
fine.
chose to spend the night there, filming a documentary, they did not realize they had awakened the thing entombed within the walls. By morning, only their bodies remained, perfectly intact, yet their faces contorted by grotesque, frozen smiles. Those smiles were not their own. They bore the mark of Labu, an ancient entity that sows silence through the horror of its grin. The car stopped before the abandoned dormitory, a silent monolith rising like cold stone amid a campus shrouded in mist. Emily Harris, 38, professor of folklore, stepped out. Her breath curled in white vapor as her eyes lifted to the dark windows, sealed behind cobwebs and dust. 20 years earlier, she had been a student here. Though the building had already been closed by the time she arrived, forever etched in memory as a forbidden place no one spoke of. With her was Mark Benson, 40, an independent filmmaker. He carried his camera with a mix of eagerness and unease. Behind them followed 3 students, restless with excitement and joining the project. They believed this trip was nothing more than a chance to document an urban legend. The whispers surrounding the mass disappearance of 1972. But Emily knew that within these walls lurked something far more dreadful. The wooden door shrieked as it gave way, releasing a flood of damp, frigid air. The hallway stretched forward, its peeling paint like rotting flesh. Each step they took reverberated, echoing into an endless void. Faded student portraits still clung to the walls, their smiles warped beneath a veil of dust, twisted into strange, frozen grimaces. That first night, they laid out their sleeping bags in a large room.
Students were found
Mark
intact.
positioned his
mouths
camera
stretched
toward the
into
corridor,
unnatural grins.
hoping to capture any
No
sign
signs
of
of
movement.
violence.
Emily sat by the window, sifting through old records of the case. In a yellowed newspaper clipping, her eyes caught a line stark in its brevity. Students were found intact, mouths stretched into unnatural grins. No signs of violence. Around midnight, as the others slept, Emily heard a sound. At first, she thought it was merely wind whistling through cracks. But when it came again, her body froze. It was not the wind. It was a steady, deliberate clicking, as though teeth were grinding just beside her ear. She held her breath, straining to listen. The sound seeped from within the walls, threading through the corridor, reverberating through the very bones of the building like a hidden pulse. Emily's gaze swept the darkness, and in the faint light, she swore she saw the cracks along the wall, bending, curving into the outline of an immense jaw slowly parting. The air thickened with the certainty of a presence in the hallway, watching, smiling, breathing with them. Emily clutched the papers in her hands, her mind sharp with one dreadful truth. This was no legend. They had awakened something. Nay, Sheikh. The next morning, pale light filtered weakly through the dust-choked windows, illuminating the desolate corridor. Emily opened her eyes, her chest still heavy from the night's strange symphony of sounds. She sat up, stepped out of her sleeping bag, and instantly felt the suffocating stillness. No soft snoring, no restless chatter of young students, only silence pressing against her eardrums like a weight. When she turned, her heart seized. On the cot in the corner, Rachel's body lay motionless. Her eyes were wide open, void of pain, yet her face was stretched into a grotesque smile. unnaturally long, her lips frozen in a hideous arc. No wounds, no blood. Simply life gone, leaving behind a flawless shell and a hollow grin. Mark rushed forward, panic in his movements, camera in hand. He tried to capture the scene, but when he played the tape back, the image fractured into streaks of black and white static. Only the sound remained intact. A jagged, repetitive clatter, sharp as bone against bone. The grinding of countless unseen jaws hidden deep within the walls. The two remaining students stood paralyzed, terror etched in their eyes. Emily forced herself to remain composed, though her hands trembled as memory clawed at her. The records from 1972 had spoken of deaths exactly like this. Bodies untouched, preserved as though in sleep, yet every face marred by that unmistakable smile. She knelt beside Rachel, staring at the twisted expression. That smile was not the girl's own. It belonged to something else, something that had used her features as a mask, a message to those who dared intrude. The room grew oppressive. From the ceiling, flakes of paint began to fall, revealing a network of hairline cracks spreading across the plaster. They bent and curved, intersecting until they resembled the outline of clenched teeth. Emily's breath caught. The building itself was changing, reshaping into the vast maw of something monstrous, and Rachel was only the beginning. In that moment, she understood. The dormitory was never abandoned. It was alive. It was smiling through the faces it had stolen, and they had only brushed the surface of the truth. Adi. Alous. A heavy silence weighed over the dormitory. Rachel's body had been shrouded beneath an old blanket, yet her frozen smile lingered in the minds of the others like a brand no one dared forget. The two remaining students whispered about leaving, but Emily forced them into calm. The blizzard outside had sealed every path. They were trapped. Survival depended on unearthing whatever secrets the building kept buried. Emily led the group into the basement. Darkness clung thickly to the air, their flashlights sweeping across splintered chairs and file cabinets smothered in dust. Amid the rot and debris, Emily found a leather-bound notebook, its cover torn and frayed. When she opened it, the stench of mold and ash rose, but the words within, trembling, uneven strokes, were still legible. It was the journal of a student from 1972, the sole survivor of that year's tragedy. The first entry made her breath catch. We heard laughter in our sleep. When I opened my eyes, my friends were smiling at me, but it was not their smile. They did not speak. They only sat there, waiting. The pages that followed spiraled into terror. Each night brought the sound of teeth gnashing within the walls. The writer described it as a choir of bone and enamel. One student vanished inside the bathroom, leaving behind only damp air and a mirror etched with a strange face, its grin stretching unnaturally from cheek to cheek. The final entries were broken, the ink warped by tears. I escaped, but when I looked back, they were all still there, motionless, their smiles frozen like masks. I know one day it will come for me, because even now, the grinding teeth echo in my ears every night. Mark filmed close-ups of each page, his face drained of color. The two students pressed into one another, whispering, unable to raise their heads. Emily finished reading, her chest tightening as though the basement itself were crushing in around her. The cracks in the walls here were not ordinary. They bent into curved arcs, converging like the joints of a vast, unseen smile. Then the familiar sound returned. The grinding of teeth, louder now, heavier, as though emanating from the journal itself. Emily snapped it shut, but the noise swelled, reverberating through the basement, circling them with a suffocating pulse. The flashlights flickered, then died. In the darkness, Mark muttered the name of one of the students, but only faint laughter replied. When the light returned, one of the two was gone. Only a backpack remained on the floor, its zipper torn open, and on the damp concrete, a slender curve had been etched, as though a new smile had just been carved into the world. Emily staggered, her heart hammering. She understood now. The journal was not merely a record. It was an invitation, and the fresh disappearance proved that the cycle of 1972 had begun again. The grinding no longer came in scattered bursts. It thundered all at once, as though hundreds of jaws were clenching around them. Emily dragged Mark and the last remaining student, Lisa, up from the basement. But when they emerged into the corridor, the dormitory was no longer the same. Cracks along the walls had split wider, curving into grotesque arcs that met and intertwined, stretching into endless, distorted smiles. Fluorescent bulbs flickered violently, then burst, shards falling like shattered teeth. Each step made the floor groan, the sound resonant like a lowered jaw, grinding against an unseen upper. Lisa sobbed, her trembling hand pointing toward the far end of the hall. Doors along both sides creaked open in unison. From within, blurred faces peered out, all of them smiling. No footsteps, no breath, only hollow figures, their frozen grins and vacant eyes fixed upon them. Mark raised his camera, desperate to capture proof, but the lens recorded only a single image, an immense set of teeth filling the frame. He stumbled back in horror. When he looked again with his own eyes, the figures were gone. The corridor stretched empty and endless, saturated with the metallic stench of blood. Emily clutched the journal tightly, searching for guidance. In the final entry, the survivor of 1972 had scrawled, "If you want to escape, you must return to the place where it first began to smile. But beware, the smile never closes." The common room, Emily whispered. It was where the students had once gathered, the heart of the dormitory. They raced up the shadowed stairwells. On each floor, the walls trembled, plaster crumbling like gums seeping blood. Overhead, cracks stretched into curving lips, drawing shut as if the entire building were preparing to grind them between colossal jaws. The common room stood open. Inside, the vast space yawned beneath a ceiling torn away, exposing the ashen sky. Yet the clouds had contorted into the form of a monstrous smile, upper and lower masses pressing down upon the structure. On the floor, desks and chairs were arranged in a perfect circle. At its center sat a fractured mirror, but the reflection it gave back was not their own. Instead, it revealed another room, brighter, filled with students sitting in silence, every one of them smiling. Among them, Emily recognized Rachel and the student who had only just vanished. They waved, their grins twisting, stretching impossibly wide. Lisa screamed and rushed forward, but Emily seized her arm and pulled her back. At that instant, the mirror splintered with a shriek, the sound of teeth grinding echoing through the chamber. Cracks radiated outward from the glass, racing across the walls, threatening to tear the building apart. Mark shouted, It's swallowing us. And it was true. The ceiling sank lower. The floor swelled upward, furniture and debris sliding into the widening void at the center of the room. A true mouth had taken shape, and they stood at the edge of its throat. Emily knew with terrifying clarity, unless they found a way to end the cycle, they would be consumed, their faces added to the endless, eternal smile. Ni? Oh. The common room shuddered violently. Cracks widened along the walls, bending into grotesque curves like sprawling mouths. Segments of concrete broke loose, crashing down with the sound of teeth being torn from bone. The dormitory itself was sealing shut around them. Mark clung to the camera, his hands trembling uncontrollably. "We have to break the mirror," he shouted. Lisa screamed, clutching her head, as the deafening grind of invisible jaws roared in her skull, driving her toward madness. Emily tightened her grip on the journal. The words returned to her mind. "If you want to escape, you must return to where it first began to smile." Her gaze fell upon the fractured mirror. It was the threshold, the origin, and the end. "Don't look at it," Emily cried, but too late. Lisa's eyes had already locked onto the faces within. On the other side of the glass, Rachel and the vanished students smiled back, their grins splitting wider, tearing toward their ears. Lisa's body trembled, then lurched forward into the circle of chairs. She hurled herself at the mirror and vanished, her form swallowed in an instant, leaving only a shrill, piercing laughter echoing in the chamber. Mark staggered backward, his face pale. "We can't escape. It wants us. It wants everyone to smile." Emily knew there was only one path left. She tore pages from the journal and scattered them around the mirror like a seal. The words, written in a desperate, trembling hand, ignited the moment they touched the ground. Green fire erupted, casting the chamber into an unholy glow. In that light, its true form was revealed. Not a person, nor a multitude, but the dormitory itself. Every wall was a gum, lined with teeth, every crack a bleeding fissure, every window an unblinking eye. The structure laughed with its entirety, its smile eternal and unyielding. Emily turned to Mark, her gaze steady. "One of us must remain to bind it. You must survive to tell them what waits here." Before Mark could protest, she hurled herself into the mirror, clutching the journal tight against her chest. The green blaze consumed her, devouring both her body and the glass. The room convulsed with a final thunderous gnash of teeth, and then fell silent. When Mark opened his eyes, the dormitory lay still. The cracks had vanished, the ceiling restored, the mirror reduced to a scatter of lifeless shards. Lisa, Rachel, the countless others, gone without trace. He stumbled outside. The sky was clear. The storm had lifted. Yet, within his ears, faint and insistent, lingered the grinding of unseen teeth, like a lullaby, both familiar and inescapable. Mark understood then. The loop had not ended. It merely waited, patient, for another smile to open it once more. "Ooh, ni nei, ban dao, pai." In Adams, Tennessee, the legend of the Bell Witch has never faded. In the early 1800s, the Bell family was tormented by knocks on the door, disembodied voices and horrors so relentless that even President Andrew Jackson came to witness them. More than a century later, a young family moved into the old house, convinced it was nothing more than superstition. But when night falls, the knocking returns, cold, deliberate, uninvited, and a lullaby drifts from an empty room, a reminder that the curse has never loosened its grip. Nah. The dirt road into the outskirts of Adams was blanketed with brittle leaves and the damp rot of autumn. Behind the wheel, Nathan fixed his gaze on the house that slowly emerged through the oak trees. Beside him, Claire tightened her grip on his hand, while Emma, their young daughter, dozed in the back seat, clutching her wool-knitted doll like a talisman. The house appeared in fragments, then whole, an oppressive silhouette against the dying light. 2 stories of weathered grey wood leaned under a moss-cloaked roof. Its windows, dark and unblinking, resembled hollow sockets in a skull. Though the place had been given a thin coat of repair, it exuded a coldness, a refusal to welcome daylight. Nathan forced a smile, telling himself that the spacious rooms and bargain price made this the perfect beginning for their family. The only neighbor they encountered was a frail old man at the fence line. He paused, his eyes following them with a weary caution. When he finally spoke, it was almost a whisper. "The Bell House never rests." And then he turned away, leaving Nathan bewildered yet eager to dismiss the warning. Claire, however, had heard every word. Her face tightened, though she masked it quickly, unwilling to spread her unease. That evening, they shared their first meal in the wide, draft-ridden parlor. The old oil lamp sputtered, casting a sickly amber glow. From the wall, a portrait loomed. An austere man with cavernous eyes. Emma kept glancing at it, whispering that, "He doesn't want me sitting here." Claire soothed her gently, chalking it up to childish imagination, though her own skin prickled beneath the gaze of that painted stare. When Emma finally drifted into sleep, Nathan and Claire noticed the sounds. At first faint, then deliberate, 3 measured knocks, steady as a heartbeat, echoing through the bedroom wall. Nathan laughed it off, muttering something about pipes. But Claire remained awake, her eyes fixed on the dark ceiling. To her, the rhythm felt less like plumbing and more like a signal, someone knocking patiently from the other side. From the hallway, the wind pressed through the cracks of the doorframe, carrying with it the sharp, earthy scent of soil freshly turned, damp and ancient. The house, silent to the ear, seemed to murmur in its own secret tongue. The new Bell family had come seeking peace. Instead, they had stepped into the echo of a curse that had never truly died. Nash. Oh no. The second night passed, and the knocking returned. This time, it was no longer scattered. 3 sharp knocks in succession, then silence, only to begin again, steady, deliberate, like a hand tapping with patient insistence on the walls themselves. Claire stirred awake, her body stiff with unease. Nathan still slept deeply, but she knew at once these were not pipes, not branches scraping the roof. The sound carried a weight that seemed to rise from inside the house itself. Slipping from bed, she crept down the hallway. The house was a cavern of shadow, moonlight spilling weakly through dust-streaked windows. As she neared Emma's room, Claire froze, heart pounding. From within came a lullaby. A woman's voice, soft, steady, humming a tune worn thin by time. The melody was slow, trembling, soaked in the drawl of the Old South. The bedroom door stood ajar. Claire pushed it open an inch and saw Emma sound asleep, clutching her ragged doll to her chest. The child's lips were still. Yet the lullaby continued, rising from the empty rocking chair by the window. Claire slammed the door shut, clutching her chest, and did not dare close her eyes again until morning. By dawn, Nathan was too busy unpacking to notice the hollows under her eyes. He only laughed, insisting she was letting the house get to her. But when Claire carried breakfast to the table, her blood ran cold. The rocking chair in Emma's room, no longer in its corner, now faced the bed directly, as though someone had sat there all night, watching. The day brought no comfort. Picture frames slid from walls without a draft. A chair swayed gently, though the floor was still. And Emma, while playing alone, whispered to her mother that she had seen a lady in a white dress step through the bathroom mirror. Claire steadied her voice and asked if the woman had a face. Emma shook her head. No, she never turns around. That evening, Nathan finally saw what Claire feared. As he sat reading in the parlor, the window burst open, though the night outside was breathless and still. A gust of cold air tore through, flinging the book from his hands. And in that fleeting moment, as he bent to retrieve it, he swore he saw her. A pale figure in a long white dress, hair falling like a curtain, gliding across the mirror's surface before vanishing with the blink of an eye. That night, the lullaby returned. Its ghostly cadence swelled through every room, wrapping around them like a shroud. Nathan gathered his wife and daughter close, straining to appear unshaken. Yet in the pit of his stomach, the old man's words returned. The bell house is never at rest. And when the clock struck 12, the knocking began again. 3 heavy raps, not from the walls this time, but from the bedroom door itself. Someone, unseen, was waiting patiently in the hallway, asking to be let inside. Nah, wow. In the days that followed, the Bell family home offered Nathan's household not a single moment of peace. The knocking grew constant, echoing at all hours, sometimes frantic, sometimes measured, like an unseen hand drumming out its own deliberate rhythm. Claire bore the brunt of it. One evening, while preparing dinner, she heard a faint whisper right behind her. A woman's voice, fragile, repeating her name again and again and again. She spun around, nothing but the empty kitchen. Yet the mirror above the sink had gone cloudy, the glass fogged as though someone had breathed against it. And in its surface she did not see herself, but a woman in a white dress, standing motionless, hair spilling forward to hide her face. Claire screamed, dropping the fork from her hand. The clatter brought Nathan running, but by the time he arrived, the mirror was clear again. He tried to soothe her, though his own nerves betrayed him. The air in the house seemed heavier now, thick with the weight of unseen eyes. Emma, however, treated the presence as if it were something natural. She told her father that the lady only walks through the mirrors, she doesn't hurt anyone. Then she added a detail that made Nathan's blood run cold. She keeps calling my name, really soft, like she's trying to sing me to sleep. On the 5th night, the haunting came for Nathan himself. He dreamed of the house as it had stood in the 1800s. Riders on horseback gathered outside, one of them a man whose face he recognized from history books, President Andrew Jackson. The man's voice cracked like thunder in the dream. You cannot escape. The Bell Witch has never left. Nathan woke with a jolt, drenched in sweat. And at once, 3 sharp knocks reverberated through the wall beside his bed. The next morning, shaken, he went to the town library. He dug through brittle clippings and fading records, piecing together the old legend, the mysterious knocks, the disembodied voices, objects hurled across rooms, sudden deaths. There it was in ink. Andrew Jackson had indeed come to this house, but fled after a single night, declaring it too cursed even for him. Nathan carried the papers home, spreading them across the table. Claire paled as she read, while Emma traced her small fingers across photographs of the old Bell home. That was when the mirror in the parlor rattled violently, a sharp crack splitting the silence. They all turned. The glass shivered, misting over, and a sentence scrawled itself in crooked strokes, as though carved by a finger no one could see. I never left. No one dared breathe a word. The silence pressed down, broken only by the pounding of their own hearts. And then she appeared again. The woman in white drifted across the mirror's surface, visible to all three at once. Her face remained hidden, but her presence swept through the room like a frost. Only then did the family understand. They were not merely living in an old house. They had stepped directly into the heart of a curse, and the way out was already beginning to close. Ow! The nightmares had bled from history into the present. Night after night, the Bell house grew heavier with dread. At sunset, the air turned unnaturally cold. Breath rose in clouds. Knocks rolled along the walls, mingling with whispers that made no sense in any human tongue. Nathan fought to keep calm. He locked every window, checked every room, but nothing stopped it. Claire was wasting away, her face hollow, eyes bruised from sleepless nights. She no longer only heard the lullaby. Now she felt a frozen hand settle on her shoulder whenever she stood alone in the kitchen. She would spin around and find nothing, only the wooden chair, always turned toward her, as if someone had been sitting there all along. One night, Emma woke in tears. She pointed at the bedroom mirror, sobbing. She's looking at me, she's in the mirror, but her eyes are sewn shut. Claire rushed to hold her daughter, but when she lifted her gaze to the glass, she saw it too. The pale face of the woman in white, her eyes crudely stitched with black thread, her mouth stretched open, as though to swallow every sound in the room. Nathan, panicked, yanked the blanket from the bed and covered the mirror. But the moment he did, the lullaby rose again, this time right at his ear. The melody twisted, warping into a broken hymn, layered with the faint cries of children. A crushing weight pressed down on his chest, stealing his breath, until Claire's frantic screams of his name shattered the grip. At dawn, they resolved to take Emma away, to stay with friends in town. But at the door, the child collapsed into terrified sobs. She won't let me leave. Every door seized shut at once, unmoving even under Nathan's desperate force. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the house into pitch darkness. From the hallway came footsteps, bare feet, measured, steady, drawing closer. Nathan pulled Claire and Emma tight against him, but from the mirror in the parlor, still shrouded in the blanket, came a piercing crack. Glass split open, not to reveal wood beneath, but a hollow yawning dark, like the mouth of a gate. From within poured the lullaby, clearer, louder, layered in a chorus of voices. Dozens of them, women's voices, some young, some ancient, each intoning the names of the Bell family across the generations. Emma's gaze locked onto the fracture. Her body trembled as though pulled forward. Claire clutched her tighter, sobbing, while Nathan tried to drag them away. But his legs had grown heavy, as if the house itself was rooting him to the floor. And in that moment, Nathan understood. This was not the work of a single spirit. They were ensnared in an inheritance of evil, a legacy stretching back to the 19th century. What the Bell family once endured was now reborn, binding them to a curse that had never been broken. That night, as the moon hung pale above the window, the Bell house was no longer a home. It had become a ritual made flesh, where past and present bled into one, and at the center stood Emma, the child whom the voices longed to claim. Kneel bow. The final night began with silence. No knocking, no whispers, only a suffocating stillness draped over the Bell house. Nathan felt his skin crawl. This was no peace. It was the storm crouching low, waiting to break. Emma slept fitfully in her mother's arms. Claire tried to lull her with a soft song, her voice trembling. But halfway through, horror struck her. It was not her lullaby. It was the lullaby, the same dreadful tune that had haunted their nights. The melody wasn't hers. It was being forced through her throat. She stopped at once, clutching Emma tighter, her breath caught in fear. In the darkness, the cracked mirror in the parlor began to split further. New fractures webbed across its surface, glowing faintly like congealed blood. The blanket Nathan had draped over it tore away, flung aside as if ripped by an unseen hand. Nathan charged forward, seized a chair, and hurled it at the mirror. But instead of shattering, the glass swallowed it whole. The chair vanished into the black, leaving not even the sound of impact. From within, a lullaby swelled, clear, harmonious, sung in both a woman's voice and a child's. Emma's eyes snapped open, glassy and vacant. She whispered, "She's calling me." Claire sobbed, clutching her tighter. But a freezing wind surged out of the mirror, whipping their hair, numbing their skin. Nathan wrapped his arms around them both, trying to pull away. But Emma fought violently, with a strength that no child should possess. In the chaos, Claire's grip slipped. Emma broke free. The little girl walked toward the mirror, calm as though stepping into an embrace. Nathan lunged after her, screaming until his voice tore, but he caught only the hem of her dress before her small body passed through the fissure of light. And then, silence. The lullaby ceased. Emma was gone. The mirror sealed itself, the cracks knitting closed until only a flawless pane remained. It reflected back the hollow, broken faces of Nathan and Claire, two parents staring at the space where their daughter had stood. By morning, the police arrived. They found no evidence of intrusion, no forced doors, no broken windows. The house lay quiet, as though nothing had ever happened. Emma was simply gone, leaving Nathan and Claire shattered in their grief. In her bedroom, on the small bed, lay the knitted doll. Its button eyes had been stitched shut with black thread, the work precise, deliberate, like the final act of some invisible hand completing a ritual. And so, in Adams, Tennessee, the curse of the Bell Witch never ended. It only waited for the foolish, for the hopeful, to step inside and feed it anew with fresh souls. Pow! In Port St. Lucie, Florida, there stands a tree the locals call the Devil's Tree. In the 1970s, a cold-blooded killer hung his victims from its twisted branches. Though he died in prison, people believe his spirit and the restless souls of those he murdered remain bound to its roots. At night, the rotted ropes still sway in the wind, creaking with a sound like ragged breath, the last gasps of the hanged. Those who dare to draw near rarely leave whole. Whoa! Florida, though. The summer air was heavy, thick with the swamp's breath, damp earth, rotting leaves, and the faint sting of stagnant water. An old pickup truck rattled to a stop on a dirt road, its headlights slicing the darkness before dying into silence. 4 young travelers climbed out, standing before the wall of forest that marked the edge of Port St. Lucie's wilderness. Ryan was the first to step down, eyes burning with excitement. He had read an old newspaper article about the Devil's Tree, a cursed oak where unspeakable murders had once taken place. For him, this wasn't a warning. It was the perfect urban legend challenge. Lena, his girlfriend, was less enthusiastic. Arms crossed, she stared at the dense tree line with suspicion. "This is insane," she muttered under her breath, though she followed anyway. She wasn't superstitious, not really, but the thought of standing where real people had died twisted her stomach into knots. Chris, tall and broad-shouldered, carried his ever-present video camera. He grinned as he filmed the group, already imagining how the footage would play out. "Found footage gold," he joked, panning across Lena and Maya. But Maya didn't smile. Quiet, withdrawn, she had felt uneasy the moment they pulled off the road. The heaviness in her chest grew stronger with every step. The 4 trekked deeper along the dirt path. The chorus of insects grew sparse, replaced by an unnatural silence. Nearly an hour passed before they stumbled into a small clearing, and there it was. The Devil's Tree. It towered above them, a grotesque sentinel of wood and shadow. Its bark was gnarled and cracked, the limbs bent at odd angles like broken arms. Hollow knots stared back like twisted faces. From the largest branch hung a single rope, frayed and rotting, swaying gently in the warm breeze. The creak it made was sharp, dry, like a strained breath caught in a dying throat. Maya shivered, convinced that unseen eyes were watching from the darkness. Chris raised his camera, tilting slowly upward to capture the full scale of the tree. "Perfect," he whispered. Ryan stepped closer, pressing his palm to the rough bark. Despite the heat around him, the wood was unnaturally cold. For an instant, he swore he felt a faint, steady pulse beneath his hand, like a heartbeat buried in the trunk. He yanked his hand back, masking his unease with a grin. "Here," he said firmly. "We camp here, right under the Devil's Tree." Lena stared once more at the dangling rope, unease clawing at her. But when Ryan struck a match to start a fire and Chris circled eagerly with his camera, she reluctantly joined in. Maya remained seated on the ground, her gaze fixed on the swaying rope, as though she expected something heavy to drop from it at any moment. The night crept in, shadows stretching long and endless. And as darkness swallowed the clearing, the Devil's Tree cast its shadow over them all. "No, indeed." The fire crackled and spat, casting trembling light across the clearing. The 4 sat in a rough circle, beer cans in hand, doing their best to laugh, to pretend at ease. But the massive trunk loomed above, its shadow stretching long and heavy, swallowing the fire's glow as if it wanted to smother the night itself. Chris rarely lowered his camera. He moved slowly, capturing every detail. The frayed rope swaying in the breeze, the warped knots in the bark that resembled twisted faces, the firelight flickering against the tree like shadows writhing across its skin. He smiled, satisfied. This was the perfect set for a horror film. Ryan, with the eager tone of a storyteller, recounted what he had read, how a serial killer once bound his victims, tortured them, then hung their bodies from the very branch above them. The man had died in prison, but visitors swore they'd heard the rasp of tightening rope, seen the silhouette of bodies dangling in the dark. His voice dropped lower, savoring the tension. But as he finished, the forest wind rose suddenly, scattering embers through the air. Lena shivered, her gaze fixed on the rope as it swayed harder. "That's enough, Ryan," she snapped quietly, though gooseflesh prickled her arms. Maya hadn't looked away once. Her voice was barely more than a breath. Is there someone hanging there?" All eyes turned upward. Nothing, just the rope, twisting idly. Chris chuckled, but when he glanced at the viewfinder, his grin faltered. On the tiny screen, a faint silhouette dangled from the branch, its shape swaying in rhythm with the rope. He blinked, tilted the camera again, and it was gone. He said nothing. The night thickened. Around them, the forest was unnervingly still. No crickets, no frogs, only the sigh of wind sliding through the branches. The air grew dense, each breath sticking in their throats. Near midnight, Maya bolted upright, pale and trembling. She stammered that she'd heard whispering right against her ear while her eyes were closed. It said my name," she whispered. Ryan brushed it off, insisting it was her imagination. But then, a sharp crack at the base of the tree. All four heard it, clear, distinct, like a rope tightening. Chris swung the camera around, its small light piercing the dark. The rope was swaying violently now, emitting a dry, grating screech, as if some unseen weight was dragging it taut. The fire roared suddenly, then sputtered to embers, leaving only a faint, unsteady glow. The shadow of the tree lengthened, stretching over the camp like a predator's hand. Lena clutched Ryan's arm, whispering that they needed to leave. But the path they had taken was gone, swallowed into an endless wall of black. A chill swept through the clearing, though the air was perfectly still. The rope jerked wildly, then stopped all at once, hanging slack, as if something had just dropped from it. Maya burst into sobs. Chris filmed frantically, but through his lens, he saw only twisted branches, curling and stretching like skeletal arms, waiting to receive them. Ryan forced himself to stand, voice trembling. "It's fine," he said, though his bravado had cracked. He lifted his flashlight and trained it on the rope. Empty. Nothing there. And yet, they all knew. They were no longer alone beneath the Devil's Tree. Norton, shy. The night pressed in heavy and absolute, the fire reduced to dying embers, the only real light, the trembling beam of Ryan's flashlight. The four of them huddled close, breaths short and ragged, as though the darkness would swallow them whole if they strayed apart. Chris held his camera tight, eyes glued to the screen. To the naked eye, the rope was empty, but through the lens, something else appeared. A pale, blurred figure hanging limp, head slumped to the side, hair shrouding its face. He shuddered but couldn't look away. When he panned to another branch, another body swung there. Then another, and another. 2, 3, 4, until the clearing seemed choked with swaying, spectral shapes. His throat was dry as he whispered, trembling. Guys, look at this! Ryan snatched the camera, pressing his face close to the viewfinder. The excitement drained from him, replaced by a stark pallor. It's just a glitch, he insisted. But when he lifted his flashlight and swept the beam across the tree, Lena screamed. For an instant, they all saw it. No camera tricks, no shadows. A body dangled from the branch before them, swaying in the breeze. The skin was ashen, the head hung low, the weight shifting with each creak of the rope. And then, as if dispersed by the air itself, it vanished, leaving the rope to swing hollow once more. Silence. Only Maya's choked sobs broke it. Ryan tried to steady his voice, though it trembled. Hallucinations were just stressed. But even as he spoke, a sharp crack split the stillness, like a branch snapping under a heavy load. Lena spun around and froze. Just a few steps behind her, another hanged figure. Its eyes were open, rolled white, fixed directly on her. Her scream tore through the clearing as she yanked Ryan to the ground. The fire spat and flared, shadows whipping wildly. Chris swung the camera in every direction, capturing what none of them could deny now. Dozens of figures suspended above, crowding the branches. Some only faint outlines, others so vivid he could see the deep purple bruises wrapped around their necks. Maya clutched her ears, shrieking, "They're whispering! They're calling me! They want me to follow!" Lena sized her shoulders, fighting to hold her back, but Maya writhed, as though invisible hands were dragging her toward the trunk. Ryan raised his light, shouting into the void, "We're not afraid. We only came to see." But his voice was drowned in the sudden chorus of sound, the simultaneous screech of ropes straining, taut and merciless. Above, the phantom bodies swayed together in rhythm, a silent choir twisting in a wind that wasn't there. A pale glow shimmered faintly, as though the clearing itself had become a macabre stage. Chris let the camera drop, clutching his head, mumbling, "They're not going away. They're here. They want us to take their place." The fire died with a hiss, plunging everything into suffocating black. Only Ryan's flashlight flickered, its beam jittering across fractured glimpses of horror. And in that trembling glow, all three saw the same vision. Themselves, each one of them, hanging from the branches. Bloated faces, bulging eyes, rope-burned necks. The flashlight clattered to the ground, rolling, casting fractured light up the trunk of the devil's tree. Maya went still, her eyes emptied, her lips moved with a voice that wasn't hers. "You cannot leave. The tree has chosen." No one had time to react. A sudden gust of icy air swept the clearing, and the rope groaned loud and sharp, ready, waiting for a neck to claim. "Labubu." The wind howled through the clearing like a chorus of the damned. Shadows danced wildly across the devil's tree, broken fragments of light from Ryan's fallen flashlight stuttering across the dirt and flaring briefly against the swaying figures above. Maya stood rigid, eyes rolled white, lips moving ceaselessly. "It's calling me, telling me to climb higher. It says I'll be free." Her voice was no longer her own. It was layered, distorted, as though countless other voices were speaking through her, groaning from deep within the earth. Lena clutched her tightly, sobbing. "Don't listen, Maya. It's not real, it's not." But Maya's body was cold and stiff, as lifeless as a corpse on its feet. Ryan lunged forward, grabbing Maya's arm to pull her away from the trunk. The moment he touched her, a crushing force clamped onto his hand. Agony seared down to his bones. He tore himself free with a scream, collapsing, his palm seared red with rope-like burns, as though the bark itself had branded him. "The tree," Chris stammered, his camera trembling in his grip. "It's alive. It wants blood. It won't let us leave." He swung the lens upward and saw that the hanging shapes were no longer spectral illusions. They moved, their heads tilted in unison, gazes falling on the living below. White, lidless eyes gaped wide, mouths hung opened. And for a heartbeat, Chris swore he heard it, the collective crack of necks snapping, echoing through the clearing. Then it struck. From above, a rope uncoiled, slithering down with the speed of a striking snake. In an instant, the noose cinched tight around Maya's throat and yanked her skyward. Her scream split the night. She kicked and clawed, her legs thrashing as the rope bit deeper, skin darkening to a brutal violet. Lena and Ryan seized her legs, dragging downward with all their strength, but the invisible force from the tree pulled harder, inexorable. Inch by inch, Maya rose into the air. "Cut it! Cut the rope!" Ryan roared. Chris fumbled in his pack, yanked out a small knife, and slashed at the noose. Sparks flew as the blade bounced off. The rope wasn't fiber at all, but something impossibly hard, like frozen steel. Chris staggered back, hands trembling. Maya shrieked, then fell silent. Her body twitched violently before sagging, limp. Her eyes bulged, her chest heaving ragged gasps that faltered and broke. The only sound was the dry rasp of the rope grinding against bark. "No!" Lena screamed, clawing at the tree itself, her fingers splitting, blood streaking the bark. But the branches writhed like grotesque limbs, curling out and striking her down into the dirt. Ryan's voice cracked into madness. He threw his arms wide, shouting at the looming trunk. "What do you want? Take me instead. Let her go." And the forest answered. A laughter erupted, harsh, guttural, spilling from every direction at once. It was everywhere, echoing in the trees, grinding through the soil, shaking in their bones. The hanged shadows thrashed wildly, swaying like a grotesque choir applauding his desperate plea. Chris filmed, his voice breaking into a whisper. "It never lets go. Anyone who comes here belongs to it." Maya dangled high above, her neck grotesquely twisted, and then, slowly, her lifeless eyes rolled forward, bleaching to a blank, vacant stare. The same hollow gaze as the others. Another body had joined the Devil's Tree's eternal chorus of the damned. Penny, now. Maya dangled in the air, her body limp, her face bruised and purple, her eyes hollowed into something that no longer belonged to the living. Lena screamed her name again and again, but her cries were swallowed by the skeletal trees, fading into nothingness. Ryan yanked Lena to her feet, the burn marks of the rope still glowing red across his palm. His voice cracked, raw with desperation. "We have to leave, now, before it takes us too." Chris clutched the camera tight, trembling. "You don't get it. There is no way out. It won't let us go." As if to confirm his words, the forest shifted before their eyes. The path they had taken to enter this place was gone, swallowed whole. In its place loomed walls of trees, their twisted branches knitting together, like blackened fingers to bar their escape. Every direction they turned, the beam of the flashlight cut only into suffocating dark, heavy with swaying silhouettes, bodies swinging just beyond reach. Lena's teeth chattered. It's like we're trapped inside it. Ryan's grip tightened around the knife, his eyes feral. Then we kill it. We cut the damn tree down. He lunged at the gnarled trunk, hacking again and again. Each strike rang out not like wood, but like shrieks, agonized, piercing, human. Thick sap bled from the wounds, dark and syrupy, reeking of iron and rot. The stench gagged Lena. She doubled over, retching. Chris instinctively raised the camera. Through the lens, Ryan's form blurred, his face flickering into that of a hanging corpse, eyes bulging, mouth gaping in eternal scream. "Ryan, stop!" Chris cried out. "It's turning you into one of them." The knife slipped from Ryan's grip. He staggered back, clawing at his throat. Rope marks carved deep across his neck, tightening as if dragged by an invisible noose. His breath hitched, a wet rattle. He reached toward Lena with trembling fingers. "Run, Lena, run." She seized his hand, sobbing, trying to wrench him free from the tree's hold. But in a heartbeat, the darkness surged, devouring him whole. When the flashlight swung back, Ryan was gone. Only a rope dangled gently from a branch, swaying in silence. Lena collapsed, choking on grief. Chris hauled her up, his own voice shredded. "We have to keep moving. We have to try." They stumbled blindly through the shifting woods, but the deeper they ran, the more the forest filled with them. Bodies, hanging from every branch, dozens, hundreds. Vacant eyes followed their steps, mouths slack in silent mockery. Among the faces, Lena saw Maya, Ryan, and countless others she didn't know, victims of generations past, bound eternally to the tree's curse. Their family had grown. The flashlight sputtered, its glow-dimming battery drained to the final breath. Chris whispered to the dark, as if confessing to himself. "As long as the camera records, someone will know. Someone has to know." But Lena already understood. No one would believe. No one would ever find them. The wind rose in a hollow roar, twisting into laughter, into a dirge. Overhead, the moon vanished behind the branches, smothered. The forest drowned in black. The tree had chosen. Arnin.